Good afternoon, distinguished panelists. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is 3 o'clock now, and we're about to start the session. My name is Tobina Erojikwe, and I'm the chairman of the Board of Directors of the Practical Training Academy. The Practical Training Academy, as you may know, is a not-for-profit training institute that is that has one of its main objectives as training Nigerian lawyers at no cost to them. And we've been having a series of training sessions that have been very well received. Today is the second day of our Introduction to Taxation series. And today we will be dealing with constitutional division of taxing powers in Nigeria. And we have one of the most erudite scholars in this field of expertise as our facilitator for today. Now, my role will be to introduce the speaker, and I will then hand over to Olariwaju Oke-Hanifat, who will then take us through the housekeeping rules and question times and all of that. Olariwaju is one of the young lawyers who have volunteered to help out with the work at the Practical Training Academy, and we are very grateful to her and people like her for participating and bringing the young people on board in what we do. Now, today's facilitator is someone that those of you who are interested in taxation law may have encountered or should indeed know. His name is Dr. Jude Odinkonigbo. Jude is a seasoned legal and tax professional with about 25 years of extensive community experience in legal and tax scholarship, public administration, and commercial legal practices. His professional expertise cuts across international tax law and policy, transfer pricing, tax controversy, tax policy making and reform, general corporate tax, investigation and white-collar defense, regulatory compliance, and dispute resolution. Jude is a partner in the Tax and Dispute Resolution Practice of Ike Ishito & Co. He's also an associate professor of law at the Faculty of Law of the University of Nigeria. Jude routinely advises on a broad range of local and international, local and international clients on transactional, regulatory compliance, and tax-related issues. His previous experience includes consulting for the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Federal Inland Revenue Service of Nigeria, and several states' Board of Internal Revenue Service in Nigeria. He is recognized as a notable practitioner in the IFLR 1000 Guide towards leading financial and corporate law firms. Jude holds a Doctor of Philosophy PhD degree in taxation law and policy from the Osgood Hall Law School of York University in Canada. He also holds 2 master's of law degrees in international tax law from the Yale School of Yale University in the United States of America, and in intellectual property from the Shaw School of Law at Dalhousie University in Canada. Jude is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, the Nigerian Institute of Chartered Arbitrators, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. He currently serves as the Deputy Director in charge of University of Nigeria's Accommodation and Housing Directorate, Enugu campus. Jude, of course, hasn't mentioned, but notably, Jude is a regular facilitator at various trainings. He was a member of the board of Institute of Continuing Legal Education whilst I was the chairman of that board, and he contributed immensely to developing the framework and foundation for continuing professional development in the MBA. And I think a lot of credit must go to him and other colleagues on the board at the time. Jude has also regularly facilitated MBA ICLE trainings on taxation and other areas at absolutely no cost to members of the bar, and indeed to either the MBA ICLE and now even the Practical Training Academy. So Jude, this is an opportunity to say thank you to you. I mean, this is something you've been doing literally all your life, and I've known you from our university days. So thank you very much for once again accepting to share your knowledge. I can see that Jude has slides, but I can tell you from my knowledge of Jude that you will expect him to speak very freely and flowingly without much heed to the slides that he's going to be using, because Jude always has a lot to say on taxation. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jude. I will now call on Olariwanjo Hanifat to take us through the housekeeping rules and generally take charge of this session. I would only come back at the end to say my thank yous. God bless you all, and I hope that we all enjoy the session. I'll also mention very quickly that we've frozen the chat box because people regularly distract the audience by posting their branches there. But what we've done is to paste the link of our YouTube channel, the YouTube channel of the Practical Training Academy. And I'll urge as many of you as possible to subscribe to the channel, because we have all our slides and our video recordings there. It's now a major repository with almost 3,000 people there now. I encourage you to join us. So, Lariwanju, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tobina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olariwaju Anifat, okay, and I'll be your host for today. Once again, I'm pleased to welcome everyone to this training session. Today is the day 2 of the training series on Introduction to Taxation, and our facilitator, Dr. Jude, is here today to take us through the constitutional division of taxing powers in Nigeria. Briefly, before I hand over the mic to the facilitator, I would like to take us through the housekeeping rules. The first one, this training session guarantees all the participants 1 CPD points. This training being accredited by the ICLE of the MBA. Also, you can subscribe to the Practical Training Academy's social media platform. So, and also your question and comments, you can drop them at the Q&A box at the end of the session. At the end of the presentation, I'll come back to take us through them. Our facilitator, sir, you have the floor now. You have 1 hour, 30 minutes to speak. So by 4:30, I will be back to moderate the question and answer session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Hanifat. Thank you, Tobina. I'm glad to share my thoughts on constitutional division of taxing powers in Nigeria and looking at the areas of conflict. And I thank my colleagues, the members of the Nigerian Bar Association that have joined us this afternoon. Well, the topic, the title is Constitutional Division of Taxing Powers in Nigeria. So I just added the areas of conflict. So when you talk about constitutional division of taxing power, well, I have my slides here, so but I'm going to talk more offhand and just to be sure that we learn this and understand what the topic is all about. When you talk about taxing powers, I just want to lay the foundation. Taxing powers in Nigeria. The first thing that comes to your mind is, what country do we have? Is it a unitary system of government that will run, or a federal system of government? Definitely, ideally, in theory, Nigeria is a federation. Despite what we may be seeing in practice. And being a federation, we know that there are different levels of government that make up the country, that make up the administration of the country. One, you have the federal government. Two, you have the state government. Then you have local government. So these levels of government, we're looking at the taxing powers of these three levels of government to see what areas can they impose tax or collect taxes and all that. Being a federation, we understand, perhaps some of us might have read the work of Professor when it was fiscal federalism and other materials on fiscal federalism. So federalism or federation also implies that there will be fiscal federalism. I hope you can hear me. Please, if my internet is acting up, please, I would like to be reminded.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, so in that case, we have three levels of government that really pointed out. And having that, a federal system of government supposed to share taxing powers amongst the three levels of government. And the idea behind federalism or federation is that component or perhaps sub-autonomous or independent constituent political entities decided to come together for the unity, for the interest of the entire components of the federation. For instance, you have the 50 states in the United States of America. If you look at the history, you can find out when each state joined the union. If you come to Canada, you have, I think, about 12 provinces and territories. They can tell you that the initial provinces or the states that formed the union are these, and this other state joined. So it's quite unlike what we have in Nigeria, where the military were dividing existing states. And of course, now there's still clamor to subdivide existing constituent or states to have more states in Nigeria. So now, looking at the powers, the taxing powers, as I said earlier, if you look at the Nigerian Constitution, you will find out that the Nigerian Constitution appears to focus more on dividing powers, sharing powers only between the states and the federation. Everybody here know, every one of us, they know about the executive legislative list, which we have in part 1 of the second schedule to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and also the concurrent legislative list. So there's no particular list meant for local governments, even though that if you go to the 4th schedule, you are going to see functions of local government. So we're going to address this, but first, when you talk, we all know about what tax is. I'm not going to go ahead and discuss that. I believe that yesterday's lecture probably might have, covered that. So, and you understand that tax could be a fee, could be a levy or whatever, but which government compels you to pay. But the basis of taxation is that for any tax to be legally enforceable, it must have been authorized by a law. So you cannot impose tax. You cannot start collecting taxes or impose tax without a particular law supporting that. And in this case, there's actually the ratio in the case of a peace mass transited and Federal Capital Territory. That was the position of the Court of Appeal, that for any tax to be valid, to be considered valid, that particular tax must have been supported or by a law. There should be a law that legislated, that's the imposition or collection of that tax. So, but before I continue, there are two things that we have to know when taxing powers comes in. One is the power to impose tax and power to collect tax. These are two different things. So you could see that there may be power to impose tax and power to collect tax may be separated between two levels of government or more. It could be lumped together in one. For instance, the power to impose tax deals with the power to change rates at which tax is exigible. that is at which tax is taxable. The rate of tax, we know the taxing rate in the new Nigerian tax, the Nigerian Tax Act, the new legislation, and even the previous legislation. We know what the rates are, both for personal income tax, where individuals are, that if you earn so and so between so and so, this is what you're going to pay. Or you may not even pay anything at all. The same thing applies to companies' income tax, which all of them have actually been merged under the Nigerian Tax Act. So the distinction having the SITA and having the personal income tax doesn't apply. So, but the point is that the power to impose tax deals with the power to change the rate at which that tax is exigible. It is different from the power to collect tax. The authority that collects tax may not have the power to impose it. For instance, let's use the personal income tax act, which is still enforced until 1st of January 2026, or the Stamp Duties Act. You'll find out that the federal government, okay, before going that, let's finish up this issue under the exclusive legislative list and the concurrent legislative list. So we know that under section 4 sub 2 and 3, the Constitution provides that the National Assembly has exclusive power to legislate on matters contained in the exclusive legislative list. Everybody here, any lawyer in Nigeria knows about this. And section 4 sub 4 empowers the National Assembly to legislate on matters in concurrent legislative list to the extent provided by the Constitution. So any matter that is listed in the exclusive legislative list, only the National Assembly can legislate on that. And any matter that is in concurrent legislative list, both the National Assembly and House of Assembly can legislate on that. However, there's a list that is called residual list. Even though if you, for instance, if you use final search in your constitution and start looking for the term residual list, you're not going to see anything like that. But the interpretation of section 4 subsection 7 of the Constitution, several constitutional decisions, states that that is where that power flows from, which actually that power is reserved for state government. State government has the power, or the state houses of assembly, or state government. The state house of assembly have the power to legislate on residual matters. What are those residual matters? Residual matters are matters that are not in the exclusive legislative list, not in the concurrent list, and not anywhere stated in the Constitution. That power belongs to the state exclusively, not just it belongs exclusively. And this flows from the principle, the understanding of federalism, because the principle of federalism is built on this binary arrangement, or even more, or that the states came together and said, okay, we have to form a union. Then what powers do we need to donate to the center? That is the federal government. We said, okay, the power to secure the country, set up the army, control currencies, national defense, and all that. The national government should handle that. So then we can say, okay, when you come to the concurrent list, these are the ones that both the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly could share. And this is where the principle of doctrine of covering the field applies, which has been decided in many several decided cases, that whenever the legislative powers of the National Assembly and that of the state conflict in the exercise of those powers listed in the concurrent legislative list, that the powers of the law made by the National Assembly will override or cover the list. So, and now coming to taxing powers. There are taxing powers. If you look at the exclusive legislative list, you're going to see taxing powers in item 16, which deals with customs and exercise. You go to item 25, it deals with export duties. Then you come to item 58, it deals with stamp duties. You go to item 59, it deals with income, that is personal income tax, company income tax, capital gain tax. So, by implication, these particular powers, taxing powers, belongs exclusively to the National Assembly, and to that extent, the federal government will be the right authority to do what? To enforce those laws. If you read the Constitution, there's this Professor Ben, anyway, before getting to that, Now, what are those taxing powers under the concurrent legislative list? Is there any distinct and separate taxing power under the concurrent legislative list that is not in the exclusive list? That is the question. And the answer is no. Because if you go to item 7 of the concurrent legislative list, that item says that the taxing powers under item 58 of the exclusive list, it actually expressly mentioned item 58 and item 59. What it did was that it mentioned stamp duties, and stamp duties in item 58 of the exclusive legislative list. Then he mentioned income taxes, personal income tax. Personal income tax is under item 59. Capital gain tax is under item 59. So stamp duties, of course, deals with taxation of document tax dealing with documents. So, but item 7 exempted only one tax, which is not in the concurrent legislative list, and that is companies income tax. So, but it goes ahead to say that the National Assembly, if you want us, I can pull that up for us to read, so that this will be very clear to some of our people here. Anyway, I think I should just paraphrase it. Maybe at the right time, we can go ahead and then read that. So the point is that now the item 7, as I said, says that the powers, those powers which you have in item 58 of the exclusive legislative list, item 59 of the exclusive legislative list, that the National Assembly can authorize state government to collect those taxes, with the exception of companies income tax. It's only company income tax that was exempted. So, which means that the power exercisable, that should be exercisable by the state for any of those taxes that I mentioned, especially in item 58 and 59. 58 is stamp duties, 59 is income, both personal and corporate, though it exempted corporate company income tax, capital gain tax, that the state government or the State House of Assembly could go ahead and make law empowering, make law for its collection. Use the word collection. So I think maybe if I can pull up the Constitution and anyway, that waste of time. But that's, I just paraphrase what the item 7 say. Then in item 8 says that the state houses of assembly should ensure that the collection of those taxes for which item 7 of the concurrent list empowers it to collect, that it must avoid double taxation. So double taxation meaning that the same head of tax cannot be imposed on one person. For instance, collection of personal income tax. The state actually have the responsibility to collect. I cannot pay personal income tax in one state and go to another state to still pay the same, except if you're an itinerant worker anyway, in which case it has to be prorated based on the time you travel within each of the states. So this gives us an idea. Please, are you still seeing what I'm sharing? Hello? Are you?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
You can see that, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, of course, we've seen item 16, as I said, is customs and excise duty, 25 exports duties, 58 stamp duties, 59 income, profit, and the rest of them. So now it has been established that Professor Ben Wabel actually argued that there is no taxing power in the concurrent list other than the one actually mentioned in the exclusive legislative list. That is, these are the main taxing powers that that we have. So then, and these are the areas we normally have issues. We normally have problems in these areas. For instance, issues of sales tax and VAT. This has been a very long-standing issue because there have been this argument, which has been argued for a very long time, and it seems to have been settled by the Supreme Court in Attorney General of Lagos State and Ego Hotel, Supreme Court decision. It seems we're going to look at that decision and to know whether that particular decision has actually resolved the conflict. That's why I say constitutional powers and areas of conflict. One, the Constitution, we looked at item 16 of the exclusive legislative list, which deals on custom and excise. We looked at item 25, which deals on export duties. We looked at item 58, which is on stamp duties. 59 is on income and capital, personal income, corporate income tax, and then personal, and then capital gains tax. There is no mention of value-added tax anywhere in the exclusive legislative list. There is no mention of value-added tax anywhere in the concurrent legislative list. There is no mention of value-added tax anywhere in the body of the Constitution. Now, the question is, because the National Assembly can only legislate on those matters that they have the exclusive powers to do so in the exclusive legislative list, or anywhere such power is conferred on them by the provisions of the Constitution. And you should understand that state government exercises rights or powers, legislative powers, on matters in the concurrent legislative list concurrently with the federal government, with the National Assembly. Knowing anyway that if there is any conflict within the power, the laws made by the National Assembly and that of the state in that common legislative pool, that's what I call the concurrent legislative list, that the law made by the National Assembly to that extent will override that of the state. But the powers of the one based on my interaction with some, especially some of my students, I understand that some people may think that anytime the National Assembly makes a law and that law conflicts with the law made by the state, that the law made by the National Assembly will override that of the state to the extent of its inconsistency. Interpreting section 1 sub, maybe section 4.5 of the Constitution. But it is not true. If we read the provisions of the Constitution, let me see if I can pull that up, and let's leave it so that for clarity purposes. Okay. Sorry, I think, okay, yeah. Okay, yes. Section 4, sub 5, it says, wait, I just got for. Okay, if Section 4, sub 5, if any law enacted by the House of Assembly of a state is inconsistent with any law validly made by the National Assembly, I want us to note that particular word, validly. It says validly. So that means if the National Assembly makes a law that is unconstitutional, that does not fall within its powers, the constitutional powers granted it, that there's a problem. So if any law enacted by the State House of Assembly is inconsistent with any law validly made by the National Assembly, that law made by the National Assembly shall prevail, and that other law shall, to the extent of inconsistency, be void. So the question now would be, does it mean that at any point in time, the National Assembly makes a law relating to taxing powers, whether the taxing power exercise is authorized by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the exclusive legislative list, concurrent list, or by any provision in it, that particular law must override that of the state, and that of the state law becomes null and void to the extent of inconsistency? I do not think so. Based on the principle that the interpretation of Section 4.7, which the state, the court of the Supreme Court, in the Attorney General of Ogun State against Aberewal, that it recognized the fact that the state exercises residual power, has a residual power. AG Federation and AG Abia State and AG Federation, and also AG Federation and Lagos on the issue of interpretation of the power to collect taxes relating to hotels, issues of tourism and all that. So the court has consistently recognized residual power of a House of Assembly. And that residual power is actually exclusive. An article I published with my good friend Nduka Ike that was published in Commonwealth Law Bulletin in the UK. That was in 2015, where we argued this in detail. And anybody who is interested, I can make that article available to them. So now, the point is that any taxing power that is exercised by a state, for instance, development levy or something like that, the rest, that the state, the National Assembly, if the National Assembly makes a law to conflict with that, the law made by the National Assembly, the court will not enforce it, because the National Assembly is going into an exclusive area for the state. Even though most people always think the National Assembly, the power override that of the state in all cases. So, and now, before the 1999 Constitution, we need to understand that there was this Taxes and Levies Approved List for Collection Act, which was the decree enacted by the federal government, I think in 1993. Taxes and Levies Approved List for Collection Act. If you go to the schedule, you will see how it partitioned taxing powers. But that particular law has been declared null and void by the Court of Appeal in Uyo local government and Akwa Ibom state government. The reason was that section 1 of it, because being a decree, which the military, everyone, especially some of us who studied under the military regime, is aware of the military jurisprudence, knows that once the military comes in, they enact a decree suspending the Constitution and leaving only maybe the fundamental right enforcement, the fundamental right part of it, and that particular provision is going to be subject to the provisions of the decree. The decree is always supreme. And section 1 of that Taxes and Levies Approved List for Collection Act still retain that particular provision. And on that basis, the Court of Appeal in your local government and Akwa Ibom state government declared to be null and void to the extent of it. Declared it null and void. And now somebody is going to ask, sorry, why is it that some of these laws made during military regime continues to apply? And this brings us back to value-added tax. The value-added tax we are using today was a military decree. It was a military decree. Made, I think, the same 1993 when sales tax law were abolished. Sales tax law had been in existence before that. So, but we do know that the existing law clause of the Constitution, which preserves provisions of existing laws that were enforced when the military were there to still be part of our laws. I think that's section 315 of the Constitution provides that all the laws that were in existence before the military, when the military were there, before the coming into force of the 1999 Constitution, will continue to be part of our laws. But there are conditions. If you read section 315 of the Constitution, you find out that if an existing law conflicts with the provisions of the Constitution, that particular existing law is going to be null and void to the extent of its consistency. Or there is also this question a bit. I'm not going to go into the description and explain what the existing laws clause 315 says. There is issue of the appropriate authority, like the president and government, the action you need to take. The action that the president or the governor has the appropriate authority relating to either federal legislation or state legislation need to take before such an existing law will continue to apply or even the court. So it is under the same section 215 that the NYC Act, the Land Use Act, and all that were made part of the Constitution, and the process of amending the Constitution will be followed in amending the Land Use Act or the NYC Act. So the question has been on this value-added tax. Value-added tax, as I said earlier, was not mentioned anywhere in the exclusive legislative list concurrently, so any part of the provision of the Constitution. So to that extent, people are saying that if it does not, the value-added tax is not a creation of the Constitution. But some people argue that you have Section 62 of the Constitution, which deals with, it is called Trade and Commerce Clause. So if there's any particular trade and commerce relating to interstate transaction, if the tax covers interstate, I hope you can hear me. I don't know if my internet is telling my internet. Okay. So for interstate transactions, if a state government makes a law that will affect interstate, that's a problem. If a state government imposes or makes a tax law that will regulate international trade, that's a problem. You remember what happened? Yes. In the case of H.O. the Supreme Court decided because of the state government made a state law that actually had interstate effect, that goods that brought into Lagos or from other areas, the state is imposing taxes on them. And the decision was that any particular state tax law that imposes tax on interstate, that is state and state, or international, that will be null and void. It is what it means that the State National Assembly, State House of Assembly has exceeded its powers. So even the interpretation of the item 62, which deals with Trade and Commerce Clause, confers the power to make that law, interstate transaction international, on the National Assembly to make laws on that. Then you also have item 68, which deals with incidental and supplementary matters. So some have argued, oh, the value-added tax could come into incidental and supplementary matter. But the question is that one may argue, if it is going to come under incidental and supplementary matter, well, any matter that the item 68, incidental and supplementary power will support, must have been attached to one of the heads in the exclusive legislative list. And the answer is that we can't find where this. So this has been a problem. This has been a problem. So now, I don't need to mention a lot of cases that are coming, including Mama Cass and Lagos State government and the rest of them. But the case of Attorney General of Lagos State and the Eko Hotel, popularly called, some people say it's the Eko Hotel and AG Federation, is not the proper title is not Eko Hotel and AG Federation. It is Attorney General of Lagos State government, the Eko Hotel. Because Eko Hotel went to court at the Federal High Court and questioned he didn't actually question the propriety of the state government to make the sales tax. But what he said is that this sales tax made by the state government is similar to the value-added tax made by the federal government of Nigeria. Both of them are consumption taxes, and that we cannot pay twice. We can't pay to the state. The state is demanding every money you collected from people that come to your hotel or eating, the sales tax applies, bring it to Lagos State government. The one that is applicable, the federal government will say you will also give us VAT. But in the same subject head that each of the two taxes. And this is a problem to many states, including my state. In my state, Enugu State. Presently, there is issue. There's a live issue between Enugu State government and the hotels in Enugu. Somebody called me and told me that the state government locked up their hotels and all that, even when they went to court. But the question was, there's this part tax enacted sometime 2000, and I can't remember either 2014 or thereabout. It is called purchase tax. Purchase. He didn't use the word sales. So that collecting, that ordering hotels or anybody in state is actually a sales tax. That whenever you make a sale, bring so and so percentage to the state government. The federal government will also say whenever you make a purchase or whenever you make a sale, bring 7.5% for value-added tax. The argument is that both of them are consumption taxes. Even though value-added taxes are administered separately because Who bears the incidence of value-added tax is somebody who contributes to that contribute. Because you have the input and output value-added tax, the input and output. So that if I buy something and somebody charges me, and I sell, I charge somebody, what I pay is the difference. So anybody who does not contribute anything in the chain of production is the person who bears the incidence of value-added tax. However, aside the regimen that each of these taxes follow, both of them are still consumption tax because the incidence still falls on the consumer who contributes nothing. So now, in going back to AG, Lagos, it was a was the first one to Eco Hotel and AG Lagos State. And Eco Hotel, using originating, commencing its action via originating process, originating summons, asked the court, please, they come in who will pay this money. Because the same amount we are collecting for VAT is the same money that the state wants. And we can't pay the two of them. Give us an account, trust account, where we can, an account or we can direct us to where to pay this money. Whenever both federal government and state decide on who collects what, we'll move the money to them. Lagos State government challenged the authority, the jurisdiction of the federal high court. We're going to come through that. That the state federal high court does not have the jurisdiction to entertain this matter because it does not deal with the revenue of the federation under section 251 of the Constitution, 251(1) of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It also filed a counterclaim. Lagos State government filed a counterclaim. But at a point, Lagos State government withdrew the counterclaim because the counterclaim was trying to question the validity and authority of the Value-Added Tax Act. It was withdrawn. The Federal High Court gave a decision, assumed jurisdiction. Court said it cannot rule on your interlocutory application challenging the jurisdiction. We will merge everything at the final judgment. The court will decide whether it has jurisdiction or not, and then determine the case and merit. It determined that it had jurisdiction. It determined that the value-added tax has covered the field using the doctrine of covering the field. And this is where I have an issue sometimes with our constitutional, some of the cases we read. If you read the history of doctrine of covering the field, you will find out that doctrine of covering the field is only invoked when the power that is the subject of litigation involve the exercise of power in the concurrent legislative list where both the state and the federal has power to. Where both the state and the federal have the power to do whatever or legislate on. You cannot invoke the doctrine of covering the field to settle matter that is the exclusive legislative list because that has already been given to the federal government. And you cannot invoke it to settle a residual matter which the state has exclusive power to legislate on because that power is the power that is not the exclusive list, is not in the concurrent list, is not in any way in the provision of the Constitution. Whatever it is, however, I'm just telling you what the court said, that the doctrine of covering the field, that the value-added tax has covered the field. And to that extent, the case, the sales tax enacted by state will not be applied or is not inoperable. The state government appealed to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal struck it out and still said that the value-added tax was valid. Because the main issue, the argument was, since the value-added tax is not in any way in the provisions of the Constitution, that is, if the constitutionality of the value-added tax was the issue, which was not, since the state government has withdrawn its counterclaim. The matter went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court finally decided that the value-added tax has covered the field. And most of the courts now you go, they will cite Attorney General of the AG Federation and Attorney General of Lagos State Government and the Eco Hotel as an authority. With that decision, value-added tax has covered the field that no state government should legislate on matters dealing with consumption taxes. But there's an area open for the legal department or the Attorney General, the Ministry of Justice of each, the Minister of Justice of each of the state governments in Nigeria. That particular opportunity is that if you read the judgment of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court decided that the value-added tax has covered the fare, the court expressly stated that what is in issue is not the constitutionality or otherwise of value-added tax. The issue was who will collect the money on sales tax. And because that the Lagos State government has withdrawn its counterclaim, so it is no longer before the court, and court is not a Father Christmas. So that issue was not discussed. There's still an opportunity for the state government to question the validity or otherwise of the Value-Added Tax Act. So that is on the powers of the state vis-a-vis that of the federal government. We'll come back to it later. Let's go to local government. Does our local governments, do they have taxing powers? I wrote an article that was published in Intertax anyways. And my very good friend, Professor Ray Sachara, a distinguished professor of law, also wrote an article, a very quality article. He published before I read it. Both of us, we took different views. Ray's opinion was that local government has no fiscal powers. It does not have any taxing power. You may agree with him. You may agree with me. The choice we have, the argument is there. So it is an intellectual exchange of ideas that you can decide to support that party or you create your own party. But I said no. The part I differed from Race was that Professor Race looked at taxing power as a single issue. The taxing power is beyond the power to impose tax. There are two arms of taxing powers, as I explained earlier. In Australia, it is applied there. And I think our court has recognized that. I'm going to come to it. Honorable Justice Peter Afe explained this later. I think the decision was in that February this year, in the case of Plateau State Internal Revenue Service against Jos Electricity Distribution Company, PLC, where the court of appeal, the lead judgment read by Honorable Justice Peter Afe, he recognized that. So the taxing powers are at two levels: the power to impose, the power to collect. So it is not just the power to impose or make the law. For instance, Personal Income Tax Act. All the states collect personal income tax from individuals resident in their states. Are you getting that? So under the old law, it's still up until 1st of January 2026. The personal income tax is still in force. That's what we're still using. If you look at section 2 sub 2 of the Constitution of the Personal Income Tax Act, the tax authority, the relevant tax authority in charge of the state where an individual residents collect taxes from that person. Now, if you look at section 3, subsection 2 of the NTAA, Nigerian Tax Administration Act, the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, section 3, sub 2, it confers the same section 3, sub 2 confers the collection powers to state tax authorities for individuals who reside in their state. Similar power was conferred on the same tax authority by section 2 sub 2 of the PITA, which is still in force until we get to 1st of January 2026. Now, if you look at section 3 subsection 1 of the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, 3.1, that is for the Nigerian Revenue Service, formerly or still FIRS, until 1st of January 2026. So residence is very important in this case. So I guess I'm going to also devote a time on which court can you go to ventilate your grievances. Must it be tax appeal tribunal? The issue of whether it is tax appeal tribunal or federal government has long been settled by the Supreme Court. Now, and that is where the case of Honorable Justice Peter Afen in Plateau State Internal Revenue Service against Just Electricity Distribution Company, we are going to look at it. But coming to local government, there's no, as I said earlier, there's no specific provision. There's no third list, just as you have exclusive legislative list, concurrent legislative list, not for local government. So you won't be, I'm not going to quarrel with my good friend, Professor Researcher. Anyone who will say that local government does not have it, does not have tax collecting powers, does not have taxing powers. But as a tax caller, I know that taxing powers are two levels: the power to impose and the power to collect. So even if you don't have the power to make law imposing tax on individuals, property, or any subject at all, creating that particular tax base, you can have the power to collect tax, just as state governments have the power to collect personal income tax, even though no state in Nigeria can make a law amending the Personal Income Tax Act, or let's say the Nigerian Tax Act, because these are national laws made by the National Assembly. I remember there was a time, I don't have to mention the name of the state, somewhere in the south of the country, who told people that if he wins the election, he's going to make sure that he make a law exempting some people from paying personal income tax. No state government has the power to amend the collection or the imposition, amend the imposition of personal income tax, because it doesn't have the power to make the law. Here we looked at item 59 of the exclusive legislative list, which actually mentioned personal income tax as one of the items in the exclusive legislative list. So no state can go to exclusive legislative list to make any law related to the subject there. So the power the state has, or any of the state has, is in relation to the collection of any of those taxes mentioned in items 58, item 59, which you find in item 7 of the concurrent list, with the exception of company income tax. Yes, in relation, because the National Assembly has authorized state government to collect all those taxes you mentioned in items 58, item 59, save company income tax. And the state can make a law for the collection of those taxes. That's what the state can do. But not to, it does not relate to the imposition of any of those taxes. So now, having said this, going back to local government, the local government appear to have been forgotten by the Constitution. However, if you read section 7.5, let's get the Constitution and read the provision of section 7, subsection 5 of the Constitution to see what it says. Please, my moderator, please remind me when I've exhausted 1 hour, please, so I can round up.
Okay, sir.
Once it is 1 hour, let me know, please. Okay, I'm trying to pull
I will do that.
Okay, can you section 7 sub 5? Can you read that for me? Okay, sorry, I'll put it. Okay, I understand what. So section 7 subsection 5, it says the functions to be conferred by law upon local government council shall include those set out. Before I read that, let me yes. Section 7.5, section 7 subsection 5 says the functions to be conferred by law. And of course, you know, these laws made by the state government. Let's see on local government. Section 7 sub 1. Let's see section 7 sub 1 and sub 2. Section 7 sub 1 reads, the system of local government by democratically elected local government council is under this constitutional guarantee. And accordingly, the government of every state, shall, subject to section 8 of the Constitution, ensure the existence under a law which provides, this is we're talking about maintaining local government. That's not the issue. The issue here is on yes. On Section 7, the person authorized by law to prescribe the area which local government council may exercise authority shall be defined, blah, blah. So we have to still land to Section 7.5, which I mentioned earlier. Section 7.5 says the functions to be conferred by law upon local government shall include those set out in the fourth schedule of this constitution. The fourth schedule of this constitution, if you pull down the fourth schedule of the constitution deals with functions of local government. And it is saying that any state, the House of Assembly of a state or the state government shall ensure that these powers are conferred on the local government. And the powers include power of collecting certain taxes, like development levy. I think I should just paraphrase it so that when you have your time, you can. I need to paraphrase so that when you have your time, you can check it. So if you go to that particular provision, you will see that the fourth schedule to the Constitution provides certain functions that the local government should exercise. And that particular function, including collection of certain taxes, right, rates, development levy, and the rest of them. So, now the question is, the local government will not have the power to make this. But as I say, there are two taxing power, imposition and collection. So the power to impose, I agree it is not there. But the power to collect, the Constitution has said that the state government shall make laws conferring those functions under the first schedule to local governments. So when we understand as lawyers, in most cases, when you use the word shall, you actually say it is compulsory, peremptory, mandatory. Only in certain cases, the court may say, well, the use of shall could be interpreted as may, but in most cases, it is mandatory. And if a power is mandatory, you cannot but exercise that power that the court has given, that the law, the Constitution has mandated you to do, even though there is an abuse of local government system in Nigeria, because there's no, the governors, the state governments determine who become local government when and how. But if we're going to interpret this provision, we know that the issue is not on what the law says. The law has conferred the state government the power to ensure that those powers in fourth schedule are conferred on the local government. And this includes the power to correlate, development, and the rest. To that extent, that power is there. So the question is, the fact that the government does not allow this to happen is a different ballgame altogether. And in my paper, I will say what one of the major problems we have is lack of issues of democracy. There's no democracy and political will on matters relating to that. But ordinarily, the local government local governments have the power to collect taxes that will exist. So let me go to on adjudication. We all know the powers. We have tax appeal tribunal has come to stay. When tax appeal tribunal first emerged, so there was this problem. There was this problem as to whether or not the tax appeal tribunal will exercise powers over matters that's supposed to be with the Federal High Court. Section 251 of the Constitution confers the power on collecting the revenues of the Federation. We have to be very careful while reading Section 251. Of course, we know that there have been a lot of amendments, the third alteration and the rest, that took away the issues relating to labor, employment, and all that. And then the labor courts were created. So then the argument was that tax appeal tribunal is encroaching on the rights. Have I spent up to 1 hour?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And also, sir, please, I want to call your attention to the slides, please. I know you are not really speaking to it. Oh, let us move to the next slide, please. Thank you, sir.
Well, sometimes you know, I function better when we'll share the slides. We're going to share that, you know. So on local government,
Okay.
the local governments are constitutionally authorized to exercise taxing powers if they do not explicitly try to impose tax, blah blah. That's section 7.5, which I've mentioned this. Then in Knight Frank and roughly this kind of state government, then Cross River and Ojua, the court held that by virtue of paragraph 1BG of the fourth schedule to the Constitution and section 7, subsection 5 of the Constitution, only local governments have the power to collect property rates and privately owned properties. So, but this part I'm going to discuss now, and I will have to incorporate it into the slide. That part is not covered by the slide. That is the taxing powers, the jurisdiction of the jurisdiction of TAT, jurisdiction of Federal High Court, jurisdiction of the State High Court over matters relating to those areas, the taxing powers that each of the states, either state or federal government exercises, or local government. So I don't need to, we all know the history of Section 251 of the Constitution, which confers exclusive legislative power, exclusive jurisdiction to Federal High Court and civil matters in certain areas, including revenue of the Federation. So I think I will need to pull up that section because we may be looking at some of the relevant sections of the Federal High Court. So when tax appeal tribunal was first created under the FIRS Establishment Act 2007, under section 59 and 60 of that particular act, there was this issue. The court were issuing conflicting decisions. The Federal High Court in Lagos will issue that, oh, TAT has power. And the one in Abuja will say, no, it does not have power. So this continued until the Court of Appeal delved into it, then later Supreme Court appeared to have settled that in the case of Federal Land Revenue Service versus TSKJ, Construcos International Society Unipersonal. In that particular decision, the Supreme Court agreed that TAT, the TAT is an administrative tribunal, which the Court of Appeal also said they can handle cases, tax matters relating to those areas where the first schedule of the Federal Land Revenue Service Establishment Act, under section 59, the first schedule, all those taxes, personal income tax, companies income tax, they can adjudicate on that. And then the document I have here, because what I wanted was to pull up the Constitution. I think I am more organized when I focus on without being distracted by some of this stuff. So we just have to continue. So now the question will be the issue relating to the powers of TAT to adjudicate on matters, taxing matters relating to any of those statutes mentioned in the FIRS Act Establishment Act is not went out. But there are conflicting decisions whenever you think about what about the jurisdiction of the TAT and the FIRS relating to the revenue of a state government. So will tax appeal tribunal have power? Before now, there have been conflicting decisions. One in Sky Bank and Kwara State Internal Revenue Service, Rector Ile-Ife and Osun State Government, and the rest of them. There have been conflicting decisions before the decision of the Court of Appeal, led by Honorable Justice Peter Afe in Plateau State Internal Revenue Service and Just Education, Just Electricity Distribution PLC. So Peter Afe, Honorable Justice Peter Afe, I agree with his decision, very sound. He tried to look at the powers of the TAT. The Supreme Court have decided, yes, TAT is an administrative tribunal, just as Court of Appeal have decided. They can handle matters or tax administrative matters. It doesn't have criminal jurisdiction. The civil matter is determined, and any appeal emanating from the TAT goes to Federal High Court. Now, the question is, if the revenue relates to revenue collectible by state government, will TAT exercise jurisdiction? Because I know that state government do establish their revenue court. They can create a high court and say, okay, this is what revenue matters. This particular high court will handle that. Or even set up a magistrate court to be doing that. Which of them have jurisdiction? Peter Afe now said, the summary is what I'm giving you. He looked at the power to impose tax and the power to collect tax, and said that the power to impose tax belongs to the particular level of government that is empowered under the law to make that particular law imposing the power, imposing tax on any subject. This deals with power to change the rate at which that tax is eligible. It is different from the power to collect. And the argument in this case was that it relates with the collection of personal income tax and so many others, that the just Internal Revenue Service had to sue the Plateau State Internal Revenue Service had to sue the just electricity distribution company, and that particular the electricity company queried the power of the TAT and that of the court of the Federal High Court that it does not have jurisdiction. In fact, Federal High Court agreed that it does not have jurisdiction relating to matters relating to revenues of the state. So the decision of Honorable Justice Peter actually, it was partly divided. He created even a table. There's a table he created where he explained them. In relation to personal income tax, Honorable Justice said that Personal Income Tax Act is a product of the National Assembly. The National Assembly made that law. So the fact that under item 7, the National Assembly empowered the state to collect that does not mean that the state imposes it. So it is a law made by the National Assembly, even though the state government is allowed to collect that tax. And as a result, the TAT can determine matters relating to that. But when it relates to development levy, which is not a law, a levy imposed by the federal government, the National Assembly, not made by the National Assembly, that was state, that the tax appeal tribunal or the Federal High Court cannot entertain that. That should go to either the High Court of the state or any of the law that the state law empowers to do that. Beautiful decision. It recognizes the taxing powers of the state and the federal at the level of imposition and collection. Then look at what happened. You know, we have 4 new tax laws that recently enacted that will take off as from 1st of January 2026. Section 3 sub 2 of that part of Nigerian Tax Administration Act now confers taxing authority. Okay, now I've gone to section 29, sorry. That's why I don't like looking at it. I think it's section, it should be, I think it's section 29. Section 29 sub 1 of the joint tax board JTB Act, Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act. So if somebody can pull up Joint Revenue Board, the Joint Revenue Board of Nigeria Establishment Act. Let me see if I can look at this section 29 to read it for everyone. We'll see what it says. So that particular provision tries to be a smart one. Section 29 sub 1 of the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act reads, the tribunal in this case is the TAT. Tax appeal tribunal shall have power to adjudicate on tax disputes and controversies arising from Nigerian Tax Act 2025. Nigerian Tax Act deals with almost it consolidated all the taxes into one particular document: personal income tax, company income tax, petroleum, all those taxes. They are now under the Nigerian Tax Act. And the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, or any other law made by National Assembly or State House of Assembly. Getting that? It is saying that any dispute or controversy arising from these laws, any law to be made by the National Assembly or State House of Assembly, that the tribunal can adjudicate on that. So somebody will question, does it mean now that the decision given by AFE has been overridden or have been, this particular section 29 subsection 1 of the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act, has it rendered it useless? It will be very easy for one to say yes, because it now says that any dispute emanating from joint tax, the Nigerian Tax Act, Nigerian Tax Administration Act, or any particular law made by the National Assembly or State House of Assembly, that the TAT has the power to administer that. I think I disagree. The JTB, the Joint Tax Board Establishment Act, is an act of the National Assembly. It's not a constitutional law. It's not a constitution. It's not, you can't compare it to the provisions of the Constitution. So if we look at the provisions of the Constitution, in particular, Section 251, Section 251 of the Constitution, and 251, when we're looking at 251, we should look at 251B. The 251A deals with revenue of the federation. The 251, especially this particular phrase or clause, a phrase, persons subject to federal taxation, which was what Peter Afe decided. So it looks at the persons subject to. So ordinarily, if the person is subject to federal taxation, then that means that the federal high court can exercise jurisdiction. And the powers of the TAT a bit flow from that. So if issues relating to levy of the development levy or any law that only the state can impose and collect, I think that this particular provision of Section 29 can be questioned. I think I have to stop here. There are so many things to say. Let's hear what our colleagues, the contributions will be. Thank you very much. Once more, this is Julian Nkonowa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I was actually going to stop you at 5:30 so that we use the last 30 minutes to attend to the question and answer. But thank you so much. We really appreciate you, sir, for the very educating and insightful presentation. Personally, I have learned a lot from the presentation, specifically on the issue of taxing powers of the local government. My own knowledge actually before, based on my research, was that the taxing power generally has to do with the power to impose. And if a government, for instance, has the power to impose a tax, has the power to actually collect, not impose, rather, like the local government that we're talking about now in this instance, what they have is only the administrative power to collect those levies that are imposed by laws of the State House of Assembly. But listening to this presentation this evening, I have a more robust view and understanding of what taxing power encapsulates with respect to local government's power of taxation. So yes, sir. I will go to the questions and answer now. Before I start with what the participants have here, I would like you to shed a little bit of light on the issue of fiscal federalism vis-a-vis the exclusive power of the National Assembly and the residual power of the State House of Assembly. Now, let me break it down. We know that the National Assembly has the exclusive power stated out, enumerated under the Constitution, and the State House of Assembly are given the residual power on items that are neither in the exclusive list nor in the concurrent list legislative list. But in the light of how encapsulating the exclusive power is, it covers so many aspects. We have the stamp duty, we have the company income tax, we have a whole excise and a whole lot of tax. And also, in the light of the VAT, that's based on the decision of Aberagba's case, Alaja Inke Aberagba's case, that sales tax ordinarily for the federal government is meant to be restricted to interstate transactions and not delve into the realm of intrastate transactions. And what we have obtainable now in Nigeria is that VAT are levied on both intra and interstate transactions. And it has taken us to a situation whereby we literally have cases of double taxation. I remember there was a time I went into I think Domino's to make a purchase, and I saw on my receipts there are actually two taxes. There was VAT and there was consumption tax on one single good. 5%, 7.5%. So I want you to please shed more light on this aspect. Can we actually say that the state has any residual power, so to say? This sales tax is meant to be one of their biggest means of generating internal revenue, and we can affirmatively say that it has been usurped by the VAT levied by the imposed by federal government. So what can we say, what can you say to this, sir?
Well, thank you, but I think you also mentioned a lot of things and talked about fiscal federalism, exclusive powers belonging to state and all of it. I have to start from somewhere. You said that, and I think there was an issue you appeared to mix up where you said that the state will tax only on issue of interstate. No, interstate is a matter that belongs to the National Assembly, and that is under the interpretation of item 62 of the exclusive legislative list, which deals on trade and commerce clause. That was actually the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Ejiogun and Ejiogun.
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sir. So I'm saying based on the Alaja Inquest case I mentioned, I said the federal government, the National Assembly has power on interstate transactions, while the states are meant to have power to levy sales tax on intrastate transaction. That's what I meant. But I'm saying that VAT seems to cover both inter and intrastates. That's my question, actually, sir.
Yeah, because VAT is a nationwide list, is expected to apply nationwide. So it doesn't have that restriction if it is considered a valid law. It's supposed to apply everywhere. But the state sales tax are taxes made by states, which are supposed to apply within the state. And that is why the court has stated, for instance, in Ejiogun and Aberagba, that it will apply for only intrastate transactions, that is matters within the state. So if I bring in goods from another state into another state, if I bring in goods from state A to state B is not supposed to impose the sales tax on that product. If I bring in goods from the United States or UK or Canada to Nigeria, for instance, into Ogun or Lagos, the Lagos state cannot impose sales tax on that. So now, on the issue of fiscal federalism, which every one of us is clamoring, is that there has to be power of the component states to be able to generate revenues, and that the Constitution should make it possible for them. So that at the end of the month, most states in Nigeria are not viable. And people are clamoring for more states. So before you start clamoring for additional states or whatever, you have to ask yourself, can I generate the money to run this state? If you cannot generate the money to run the state, if the state is incapable, that the proposed state is incapable of sustaining itself, why creating the state? So fiscal federalism and the independence of states to, so because if you look at, we've examined at least 4 heads We looked at item 16. It deals with custom and exercise. We looked at item 15. It deals with export duties. We looked at item 58. It deals with transport duties. We looked at item 59. It deals with personal income tax, company income tax, capital gains. All of them are in the exclusive legislative list. And if you look at those, even item 7 of the concurrent legislative list, the so-called taxing power are not actually taxing power other than the power to collect taxes, which the National Assembly has decided to cede to state to collect. So now, and that's why Professor Ben Wabeza has argued in one of his books that there's no taxing power in the concurrent legislative list. But you can find taxing power in residual if you look at the residual aspect of it, that is searching for those areas that are not contained in the exclusive legislative list concurrently, so anywhere in the Constitution. So that way, the state government will exercise exclusive powers to tax those areas. You mentioned about going to Dominions or somewhere else, there will be imposition of 7.5% VAT, maybe 5% sales tax. Is that valid? So the question you're asking is double taxation or multiple taxation valid? That's your question.
Yes, sir.
From my understanding of the law, the double taxation that was actually prohibited by the Constitution under item 8. Go and read item 8 of the concurrent legislative list. It says that in the collection of those taxes mentioned that are mentioned in item 7, state government shall ensure that no single person will suffer twice the same tax. And maybe, for instance, company income tax. If I pay company income tax from my own personal income to my income that I earned to state A, I cannot go to state B to still pay on the same. That is what he's saying. It confers the same power to state government under item 10 for local government, because under item 9, because concurrent legislative list empowers state government to distribute certain taxing powers to the local government. And they show under item 8 and item 10 that no one pays that twice. So if you look at the decision of Attorney General of Lagos State and Eko Hotel, it appears that reading that you'll be hearing double taxation, that the Supreme Court understands that it is wrong. But legally speaking, is double taxation illegal? Double taxation means that a particular double or multiple taxation on one particular income stream. That's what I'm looking at. Your income stream, for instance, your personal income tax. Do you know you're a shareholder in a company, right? And the company where you're a shareholder has made profit. That profit will be taxed under the head of company income tax, because that company is deemed to be a person in law. When the dividends or whatever is distributed, the profit made are distributed to shareholders. You, the shareholder, that particular profit or the one that was distributed to you, still pay tax on that. And that is your personal income. The same stream almost. So, jurisprudentially speaking, in tax theory, somebody may say, no, it is not. As far as there are laws that are supporting that. And that leads us, can the state decide to tax 90% of your income or 95%? Somebody may not be happy with what that is. So if you give the power to the state to represent you, and they said, everybody, whatever you earn, you contribute 95% and leave 5% for you. If the citizens allow that, it will stand. But the state cannot tax without responsibility. After all, in the former socialist republic, everybody works for government and they give you based on your needs. They say capitalism is the but fortunately, capitalism and socialism, that even the province in the countries where socialism was praised have all abandoned it. China has understood the importance of capitalism, even Russia. But if you decide to create a government that is going to take up the entirety of your income, what's wrong about that? Multiple taxation, if there are laws that say this, you have to collect this. What's wrong about that? However, but any state that is going to do that, especially in consumption tax, it should go and look at the decision of the Supreme Court in AG Lagos State Government and the Eco Hotel. I don't know if I did justice to it. Okay, so if yes, maybe let another. I'm waiting for another question. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. You've done justice to the question. So I'll move to the questions in the Q&A box. I will start with the one that is directly close to the conversation we are having currently. Emmanuel Agbaje asked that, can the doctrine of covering the field sufficiently exclude a State House of Assembly from legislating on the concurrent legislative list where the National Assembly has legislated on an item in the concurrent legislative list? This, in his opinion, is responsible for the multiplicity of taxes. Do you get that, sir?
Okay. Yes, let me rephrase to know, he's saying, can the doctrine of covering the field stop state government or state House of Assembly from legislating in an area already covered by the federal government? And to that extent, that will stop multiplicity or duplicity of taxation on one subject. Is that correct? I hope that's...
Well, I think his own understanding, basically, but I think his own understanding is that maybe he got the doctrine of covering the field. His own understanding is that there is not sufficient to stop a State House of Assembly from legislating on the same subject matter that the federal government has legislated on. In any ways. And he's actually insinuating that maybe that's what's responsible for multiplicity of taxes that we have currently in the country. Okay.
Well, the point is that I think in my lecture I explained this. Do you understand? So now, the doctrine of covering the field, as I stated, historically, if you read the history of covering the field, the United States, in Australia, in Canada, and all the federal jurisdictions, you will see that this is a doctrine, a principle developed to resolve conflicts, issues, conflicts relating to the exercise of powers that both the federal government and the component state government exercise in that common pool. Because concurrent legislative list contains areas where powers are exercised by the federal government and the state also exercises. Professor Ben Robinson has actually questioned the rationality of the concurrent legislative list that we have in Nigeria. He said that because if you go to concurrent legislative list, you see that it appears that powers may be shared. For instance, I can come, let me just hypothetically use education, for instance. Let's say that education is the concurrent legislative list, and I will say matters relating to primary and secondary schools, the state should legislate on that. Matters relating to federal universities and tertiary institutions. That's not what it is, but I'm just using an example that the federal government should exercise powers on that. Because sometimes, if you look at that concurrent legislative list, it appears to partition powers within it. So, to what extent do you call it concurrent legislative list? That's number one. Because if you go look at the US Constitution, the matters on concurrent issues, you will see maybe education, it will just leave it there without defining or setting up boundaries. So, as a result, the doctrine of covering the field will come to settle matters where the federal government has legislated, or even after the state has legislated, the federal government comes in to legislate. So, doctrine of covering the field is deployed to settle that. So, any particular state, let's assume that the issue of sales tax and value-added tax, which are all consumption taxes, as the court has declared in the case of AG Lagos and AG and Eco Hotel, and in so many other cases, that the doctrine of covering the field applies, and to that extent, renders the law made by the state inoperable or null and void to the extent of it inconsistent with that of the federal government. So, the doctrine of covering the field is going to help to whittle down, control the power of the state. But the question is, what about when the court goes ahead to apply the doctrine of covering the field in a matter whose subject is not in the concurrent legislative list. That's the issue. The issue would be to question whether matters relating to consumption taxes are matters in the exclusive legislative list. It's not just enough to assume that as long as the federal government has enacted a law in that area, doctrine of God and faith applies. If you read section 4, subsection 5 of the Constitution, it says that the law made by the National Assembly will override that of the state, provided the law made by the National Assembly was validly made, validly underlined, which means that if the National Assembly makes the law in an area it does not have the power to, that particular provision cannot be invoked. And why separate this from where the federal government is bringing up the issue of doctrine of covering the field in an area you don't have power to list it in the very first place? Knowing full well that matters in the residual list or residual matter under section 4, subsection 7 of the Constitution belongs exclusively to the state. So, using doctrine of covering the field to sort out this problem is one, allowing the states to exercise their constitutional powers without invoking the supremacy of the federal government to subjugate everybody. When the decision, that was when Nyesom Wike was governor of Rivers State, there was this issue on the application of value-added tax, and the Rivers State government pursued it. The Federal High Court agreed with the Rivers State government, and there was an appeal. Somehow, I don't know whether the matter was politically settled because I didn't hear anything about that case anymore. Thank you. Can we have another question?
Thank you very much for that very detailed and clear explanation. So then I'll go to the next question by Tosho Sulaiman. He's asking, I'll just paraphrase the question and not read the whole thing. He's asking, since the VAT and sales tax is not included anywhere in the exclusive, concurrent, or residual list, where does either the states or the National Assembly get their power to legislate over it from?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Why I said it's a very good question is because that question is at the core of settling that particular problem. Where does the federal government derive the power to enact VAT? Where does the state derive power to enact sales tax? And we stated here that the understanding of federalism and the principles of the constitutional power regarding powers in the exclusive legislative list, concurrent legislative list. The exclusive legislative list, any matter that is there belongs exclusively to the federal government. Any matter in the concurrent legislative list is a common pool that both the federal and the state can play together. But if they conflict, the doctrine of covering the field is used to separate and settle that in favor of the federal government. But if there is a matter you don't have in the exclusive legislative list, you don't have it in the concurrent list, it's not anywhere in the body of the Constitution assigned to any level of government, that is a residual matter, which the state should exercise exclusive legislative powers on. Now, the argument the federal government makes, federal government says, hey, the value and added tax used to be a decree we made in 1993 as a military decree. Under section 315 of the existing law clause, this has become part of our law because the value-added tax decree was enforced before the military existed in 1999. To that extent, it is existing law under section 215. And since it is existing law, we'll continue to apply that. The state will say no. Existing law clause is not automatic. If you look at section 215, there are certain conditions that an existing law must pass. One is that that law must fall within the powers that the National Assembly has the power to make law, or that the state House of Assembly has the power to make law. If you cannot justify an existing law to fall within the powers of the National Assembly as at today, you cannot invoke it. However, if there is a problem, maybe the appropriate authority, in the case of law, federal law, is the president. In the case of a state, the appropriate authority, the governor, can decide to do some adjustment for it to fall within the provision, for it to fall in line with the Constitution. And the state says, of all the taxing powers in the exclusive legislative list, in item 16, which deals with custom and exercise. Item 25, which deals with export duties. Item 58, which deals with stamp duties. Item 59, which deals with personal income tax, company income tax, capital gains. That none of this, none contains value added tax. So why getting for? And it cannot fall under the Trade and Commerce Clause under item 62. It can also not fall under item 68, which is a standard and supplementary matter, because any matter that is going to be standard and supplementary, there must be an original head where you can attach it. And there's no way to attach it. Are you going to attach value added tax on custom and excise duty? The answer is no. Are you going to attach it in export duty? The answer is no. Where are you going to attach it? However, since we have the exclusive power to list it on matters that are residual matter, and VAT is a consumption tax, since that is a consumption tax, the state should exercise that tax, exercise the power to impose that tax. But there is a new decision by the Supreme Court in the case of AG Lagos and Eco Hotel, where the Supreme Court decided that the government doctrine of covering the fee was used in favor of the federal government to say that the value added tax has covered the fee, and to that extent, the sales tax paid by the state is not required or not operable. So the question now, but the Supreme Court was very smart enough to state in that particular judgment that issues relating to the constitutionality or otherwise of VAT was not raised. Lagos State government actually raised that case before the Federal High Court under its counterclaim, but later withdrew it. And you cannot expect the court to get a rule on issue of constitutionality when the matter was not actually raised. The court is not ever that great. I think I have to stop here. More questions?
Okay, sir. So this participant is asking, what regulatory agency will businesses not registered as a limited liability company pay tax to? How much will be paid, and how will it be enforced and implemented?
You say any vehicle for doing business which is not registered, right? Am I getting
Yes,
clear?
the correct agency, the appropriate agency for business names to pay their taxes to.
Okay. Business name is a business name. It's not a legal entity, right? We understand that. So if the legal entity will know the artificial person and the natural person. A natural person with all the capacities, not an underage or those following those exceptions. A company that is incorporated, everyone will know about the rules in Solomon and Solomon. So if a company is incorporated under CAC, that company is a person under the law and should pay tax. And the law says that they have to pay the tax to the National to the FIRS, now National Revenue Service, under the new section 3, subsection 1 of the Nigerian Administration Tax Act or something like that. So under the old law, of course, what the provision is still the same. So it's just like running a partnership. If you run a partnership, if you run a business name, or any particular vehicle that is not recognized as a person in the law, it is after you've done your business, you pay your tax as an individual. If you are a partner in a company, and at the end of the day, based on your equity, profit are distributed, so you are going to pay tax based on what you have earned. And it is going to be on a preceding year basis, unlike civil servant who pay on current year basis. You find that if you are working, if you are working as an employee, before your salary comes, your employer has already withheld certain portions of your salary and send it to the Revenue Tax Authority, the Revenue Tax Authority. The same thing does not apply for people who are partners. Partners are people, they are shareholders, they're the owners of the business. For you to know whether you make, because you pay on the preceding year, you have to determine whether your business, whether profit or loss and all that. But any particular profit, the one that you collect based on your equity in the firm, you pay personal income tax. So the owners of those business names will pay tax in their own name, because it is assumed he has to be able to have his books and records to show that this is how much I have earned. But a non-juristic person will not be taxed. the tax will be paid through you, who is the soul of that business. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe that answers the question perfectly. I'll go to the next question, sir, and I'm going to be merging two questions together here. Can you talk about withholding tax? Who has the power to impose and who has the power to impose and collect the tax? Also, they're also asking someone here wants to know why it was charged VAT and withholding tax on interest on a liquidated money at the same time. I'm merging them together because of time.
Can I understand the last thing you said? Somebody wants to.
Okay, I said the last thing I said, okay. I said a participant, Darlington, from him, he wants to know why he was charged VAT and withholding tax on interest on a liquidated money at the same time. So I'm merging it with the question that is asking who has the power to impose and collect withholding tax.
Okay, well, let's start from the last. He said why he was charged interest on liquidated money, value added tax on liquidated money. Is that correct? If I
Yes,
understand the use of the word liquidated
tax and withholding at the same time.
So if I understand what he said, liquidated money, is he trying to say that he has paid it off? So if you say it's a liquidated money, interest on a liquidated money, that means they're charging an interest the money you've already paid. Interest are paid on loans. I understand interest to be paid on loans. An interest paid on loans by the person who took the loan could be a goodie to the person. For instance, before you determine your assessable profit, then those interests are deductible because you took risk to borrow money from the bank and use it to run your business. So his question is a bit convoluted. I don't understand what he means by interest on a liquidated sum, on a liquidated amount. If I understand the use of the word liquidated, that means I've already paid it. So why should I be taxed? Why should I pay interest on the money I've paid? It's not clear to me. But if you say that you are charged tax on an interest that you paid or was paid to you, if you are a money lender, you're a licensed money lender, you lend money to people and people pay interest to the loan. That's an income on you, either as a person or as a corporation, and you pay tax on that. But for someone who borrowed the money itself, that is paying the interest, why should the tax authority charge VAT? And also, it doesn't make sense, because actually interest on loan you borrow can help you. It could be a goodie to help you to reduce the tax you pay for deductions. Anyway, going back to the first one, which you said, who has the power to impose and collect withholding tax? First, let me tell you that withholding tax is not any form of taxation. Withholding tax is not any form of taxation. Withholding tax is only a means of tax collection, which can apply to any sub-head of tax. You can apply in payment of company income tax. You can apply in paying personal income tax. You can apply in paying any particular. It's an advance payment that the taxpayer makes in a particular area. For instance, when you earn your salary at a certain amount of hotel, at the end of the day, there's going to be a reconciliation. How much was deducted by employer at the end of the year? How much are you supposed to pay based on the tax rate applicable to you? There could be a reconciliation. If you've paid less, you have to make it up. If you paid more, then you look for refund. So, since withholding tax is mere a means of tax payment, advance payment of tax, and not a form of taxation on its own. So what happens is that when withholding tax, somebody withholds tax, for instance, you're a business, I'm doing a business transaction with you, you have to withhold something. You have to give me withholding tax note, what you call withholding tax note. And make sure you also send to the tax authority that is responsible. Either federal or state can collect it. It depends on the subhead. If it is a withholding tax in relation to personal income tax, you have then the tax authority that will collect it is the tax authority in the state that you reside. Or if you are a non-Nigerian resident, you only come in with any income in Nigeria, then it is going to be FIRS or the Nigerian Revenue Service. As at 2015, the authority to collect tax on residents of Abuja is now falls on the Federal Capital Territory Inland Revenue Service, which was created in 2015, because the FCT is run like a state. The National Assembly makes law for them. So the summary of this is that withholding tax is not any form of taxation, but an advance payment of tax is a means of tax collection. And on which authority are collecting depends on the type of tax. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll go to the next question now. This question reads, what happens in a situation whereby the owner of a company resides outside Nigeria while the company is registered and situated in Nigeria and have not really been doing businesses, but have been paying salaries of workers and other expenditures from his own personal accounts? How best can this be approached, especially since the company have not really been doing businesses but have been paying salaries from personal accounts? Do you get the question, sir?
Well, the point is that, what he says is that you have a company in Nigeria. The owner of the company is not in Nigeria. And that particular company does not make any profit. It doesn't make profit. He actually pays from his pocket to maintain employees of that company, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
then the last I didn't get is how to recover the money. Is it how to recover the money he has paid or what?
No, he wants to know the tax liability of the company.
Well, if you look at the new tax laws, there are certain amounts you don't make up to certain amounts, right? In this case, the company, I think the threshold have been moved, either 150 million naira. There's a particular threshold that you need to meet to pay tax, but that does not stop you from it does not stop you from filing your returns. You have to file your returns to show you don't make much. So if you run cost, if you are running loss in your business, you have to let the authorities know by filing. And when you file, then the loss can be deducted. You can carry it forward. I think the restriction on a 5-year period, it doesn't apply anymore. I think it's one of the changes that have been made by the Nigerian Tax Act, that you can carry it on as long as possible to get the money back. So, so in that case, but when you want to carry loss forward for purpose of deduction, it must be in the same line of business. So you have to make gain to be able to get the deduction. There's no tax you will pay, but you have to file your income tax. So this is actually, the question they ask is outside the subject matter that we're dealing with today. Because our subject matter is on a tax that I think, yes.
Yes, sir.
And there's some tax lawyers and tax experts who need to be consulted so they can give you a legal opinion and get their money back. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll be going to the next questions, and here I'll be merging three questions.
Restrict your question to the subject of discussion today, because I notice a lot of people are going off.
Can you hear me, sir?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, sir. So I said I'll be moving to the next question, and I have three questions here I'll be merging together due to their similarities to save time. So these questions are basically asking on the constitutionality of bylaws made by the area councils or local governments, since there's no law in existence. Okay, since they don't have a constitutional power to make laws, and the bylaws are not directly made by State House of Assembly. So the question is asking for the constitutionality of bylaws made by local governments.
I'm going to adjust it to the topic we're dealing today, the taxing power of local government. So whether a local government can make a law to impose taxes. And our understanding is that the local government does not expressly have a constitutional power to impose tax, but it has power to collect taxes. And that Section 7 subsection 5 has authorized and mandated state houses of assembly to make laws conferring those functions listed in 4th schedule of the Constitution to local governments. And that includes the power to collect rates, power to collect certain, maybe waiver and the less, all those. If you go to the 4th schedule, you will see those powers, the collecting powers, or even the laws which you can think about. So most often the state normally enact local government law. They can call it any name, where the state will say that the local government can do so and so, do so and so. So if there is a particular law, local government law enacted by a state house of assembly that empowers the local government to make laws in any subject areas, yes, the local government or the municipality or whatever you call it can make that. But if there's no law made by the state empowering it to do so, then that's a problem. Because you can't find any provision in the Constitution where the Constitution expressly conferred legislative power on the local government. Most of the time, it says that the state government should make law empowering the states to exercise the powers or the functions under the 4th schedule, which includes the power to tax and the power to do other things, including what my friend there question is asking. But if the local government wakes up one morning, and said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of all this and that's happening, I'm going to make a law. In fact, I've had a situation where local government woke up one morning and decided to tax every crate of mineral or every crate of beer, the company should pay to, and it doesn't have the power to do that. Thank you. Another question.
Thank you very much, sir. We have another question right here asking whether it would be right to state that our Constitution has not enhanced certainty of diffusion of powers of imposing taxes by the 3 tiers of government in Nigeria.
So what he's trying to do is trying to blame the Constitution for not expressly providing what was supposed to be right.
Definitely, yes, sir.
Honestly, I don't see any constitution in the world that will specify everything like, okay, the Constitution says you have to prepare egusi soup. And in order to prepare egusi, you have to go and get egusi, the melon. You have to go and buy meat. You have to buy crayfish. You have to buy this. And after that, this is the time you cook and that. So no constitution does that. Have you ever seen US Constitution? It's very small, like a pamphlet. You can put it in your pocket. As huge as United States. They are very simple, but just like this. It's not as detailed as Nigerian Constitution. The same thing applies to Canadian Constitution. It's the people who, the problem is from we Nigerians that run the Constitution. I can tell you today, no matter the constitutional amendment we make, with the kind of families living in this country, we continue to have problems. We always have a way of finding problems with the kind of people we have. So I don't blame Constitution so much, even though I know there are areas, for instance, issues relating to fiscal federalism, let states do this, and issues relating to state power to control, to have a police of its own to be able to maintain something. Well, if you state government, but sometimes if you have crazy guys as a governor of a state and you allow them to run state police, he will run all his enemies out of the state too. That's another thing. So as long as you have human beings that can devise means of this stuff. So the problem is not necessarily from our Constitution. Because the US Constitution is not as detailed as our own. It's a small pamphlet. You can put it in your pocket. And they don't amend their Constitution as frequent as we do here. Same applies to Canadian Constitution. So what about countries that don't have written Constitution? That are following customs and norms? And again, the problem is from our courts. One decision today, tomorrow, they will not even make reference to the previous decision that are in all fours with a very, very conflicting decisions. Find it difficult to know where we stand. So, in as much as I agree that the Constitution has certain problems, hasn't detailed. I mean, the problem is not from the constitution; it's from the people around the country. That's what we have. I think was it 2000, and there was the Supreme Court rendered a decision authorizing, confirming the fiscal autonomy of local government. Is that happening today? Is that happening? Because if you have the state governor, some state governors may say, okay, you get the money, you come and bring to that service, and that. It does happen. Or that this is project to. So first and foremost, if we want to fix the system, let there be democracy, free and fair election. Let's get the right people and hold them responsible. If you like, change your constitution from now to tomorrow, go 10 years to write Nigerian constitution, the problem will persist. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I will be rounding up with the last question now. I will not be able to accommodate all the questions due to time constraints. I actually intended not to go to any question that has to do with VAT again because I have so many of them. But there are two that is catching my attention. We have one asking that what are the remedy or what is the remedy available to taxpayer being subjected to VAT and consumption tax concurrently? And the other one is that can individual taxpayer challenge VAT, the legality of VAT? Can an individual VAT payer challenge the legality of VAT?
Well, let me start from can an individual challenge the legality of VAT? The answer, I think, is yes. The issue of local standing has always been a difficult problem before. When we used to have a restrictive definition of local standing that you must show that you have special interests. You're not a meddlesome interloper. You're not a busybody. But the court has actually now, the common definition is liberal interpretation that confers if matter concerning public interest litigation, why not? You can go and challenge it and let's see what the court will say. I have no problem if somebody decides because you are helping us to develop our laws and streamline things. So the issue of local standing to be against you, to be constructed, interpreted against you, a very good judge will not do that. Now, on why somebody should be, somebody will be open to taxation of VAT and sales tax or any other consumption tax and what the person will do. Unfortunately, as an individual, if you get into a mall, just like Hanifat, a lot of what you explained, you go to Domino's, you want to buy something, you look at the prices. Of course, what they taught us in our second year or whatever we did our contract, they say that when you see a price tag on an item, that's an invitation to trade. So they want to pay. They say they will charge the tax on you. So what you can do at that point is that you pay, then come back to challenge it, or you say, I'm not going to pay. But you remember that the store will never allow you to take their product without paying the necessary taxes. So you can pay it, get it as an evidence, and go and challenge. Now, for hotels, it's currently happening I don't know whether all the hotels in England have been locked up by the state government, the State Board of Internal Revenue. Some of them, yes, they say that the reason is because they are not paying the purchase tax. And the hotels are saying that the purchase tax is a sales tax. And that sales tax is the same thing with value added tax. Then if you look at, if their challenge is only on the fact that it's a double tax, either double taxation or that they don't have the power to collect, it will end up like Attorney General of Lagos State and Eko Hotel ended up. So the lawyers handling such a case have to question the constitutionality otherwise of the VAT, which was not decided by the Supreme Court in AG Lagos and AG Eko Hotel. Let's question the constitutionality to know where the power flows, where the power emanates from. It is at that point we now know whether this is allowed or not. Thank you very much. I know that Hanifa want to kick me.
Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. It was quite educating, very insightful, very detailed. It was as if anybody that has no knowledge of taxing power, I'm sure will be able to have a very good grasp of what it entails by now. Before I hand over the microphone to Mr. Tobina Erojikwe to give his closing remarks and appreciation to the facilitator, I would like to state once again that the CPD points that the attendees are entitled to will automatically be the attendance generated from Zoom will be used automatically. I can see a lot of people asking for the link. There is no link. The attendance from Zoom will be generated and utilized by the organizers. Thank you. Mr. Tobinas, I have the floor.
Thank you, Olawanju. Thank you very much for doing a very great job.
You're most welcome, sir.
Before saying thank you to Jude, I'd like to remind everyone that the link to our YouTube channel is shown on the chat box, and the slides from this session and this video can be viewed on our YouTube channel, as well as those of previous courses that we've had. And I hope you all enjoyed this session as I did. I don't know, Steve Arubika, are you still here? Do you have any comments or any other panelists here before I close off? Okay. Well, Jude, I mean, 2 hours went really quickly on this session. I was surprised when she called me to say, when she called my name and said I should come and close, and I looked at my time and it was 5 o'clock already. What an illuminating and brilliant presentation. I mean, was very loaded, with a lot of stuff from constitutional administrative law, but applied to the subject matter of taxation. Thank you very much for doing what you know how to do best, always delivering a solid and in-depth presentation. We're very grateful to you. And I'm sure all those who attended are also grateful to you. If you were looking at the number of participants, you would have seen that we met our full number quite early, and then everybody stayed on just to show that people thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, as I'm sure they did, and I did enjoy it myself. I mean, it's not easy to put this together, but you put it up again as brilliantly as you always do. And I want to just say to everybody that we owe a debt of gratitude to Jude and people like him, who always give of their knowledge to colleagues for free. And it's not knowledge, it's knowledge that's been acquired on a long journey from Yale University to York to, PhD and everything. And then a lot of practice over 25 years. So Jude, thank you very much for your indulgence and your kindness. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Olarewaju, thank you very much for doing a good job. Olarewaju is an LLM student at the University of Lagos on taxation, and I'm sure she thoroughly enjoyed this session. I understand that she's writing her thesis on this topic, so brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody that joined through. I can see my brother Idris Mohammed, and I can see Stephen Arabic.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. So we will continue tomorrow, and I hope as many people as possible should join again tomorrow. Let's keep doing what we do. Thank you all, and God bless you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Jude, thanks a lot. Grateful.
Okay.